Hello, what is going on, guys? Hucky Guy 1 here. Welcome to my review of Suicide Squad. So, Suicide Squad is directed by David Ayer and stars Will Smith, Jared Leto, Margot Robbie, many other actors and actresses that aren't really as important as these guys, for sure, because they don't really have main focus, unlike these guys. The story is after Enchantress is let loose by somebody, they need to assemble a team of supervillains to stop Enchantress from taking over the world, basically, and without leaving, and without the villains leaving, and otherwise they'll die. So let's get started with the positives. Margot Robbie's pretty good. She doesn't really have the best lines in the world. I think she delivered them probably the best she can. You can't really deliver a lot of cringy lines. I'll get to later. Correctly. Yeah, I'd say she did a great job for sure. As well as Will Smith was a great pick for Deadshot, and he did pretty great in this role. As well as Deadshot's costume, I could give it. It looked great. It actually felt kind of like for a little bit, of course, until we got rid of the mask. But it's pretty good, I'll say. And it's probably easily the best costume design in this movie. But honestly, that's about it. So my negatives is the story. Coming into this, I thought it was going to be something new because we never saw supervillains being main characters into it and being as protagonists in the story. But it turns out to be just the same as just about every other team-up movie in Hollywood. It's literally just a bunch of villains instead of heroes. I was trying to destroy an even bigger threat of a villain from destroying the world. That's basically this movie story, and it's just terrible. Just a terrible story. We've seen it many times in Hollywood. We don't need these kind of stories over and over and over again. It's just ridiculously generic and nothing new. They could have done so much more with this premise, the premise of supervillains being main characters, but unfortunately, it doesn't looks like DC just didn't really care. The editing is just so bad. It might honestly be some of the worst editing in Hollywood history, in all honesty. It's so terrible. Terrible. They obviously cut out so much scenes that to the point where it made it feel like there's two completely different movies shoved into one movie, and the reason why they cut it too was kind of stupid reason. Batman v Superman and was so dark, and a lot of people didn't really like how dark it was, so they decided to cut to so much of this, and just literally that's it. And they decided to cut a bunch of stuff, a lot of Joker scenes, so a lot of just about many things that could have made the movie better, but it turned out it's just he didn't really care about making this film and just wanted to please the audience by not making it as dark as Batman v Superman, which didn't really happen. This movie could have easily been good if they kept in a lot of the scenes that they cut out, but seriously, this is just some awful editing. Which also messes with the pacing as well. The pacing is awful in this movie. It's not just that about it. It's just awful throughout. And just, you get so bored throughout this movie. It drags so much. And each act is ridiculous. Similar to team-up movies to the point where it just drags and it just feels so different from each other. and it's ridiculous how terrible this pacing is. And Jared Leto is just a disgrace to the Joker. The Joker is one of the best villains in comic books, and also had probably easily the best villain portrayal in a movie before this, which I guess makes sense that it'd be hard to top it, but seriously, Jared Leto is nowhere near any of the other Jokers. He is easily the worst Joker. He is so terrible. He can barely act, and he just did terrible. I mean, he was over the top most of the time, and it's just terrible. I can't even say much else. It also doesn't help when Joker's character is reduced to a background role after they cut out many of his scenes, but that's still not an excuse for Jared Leto. But my point is, they completely wasted what could have been a good character. But I don't think he's ever going to recover. Joker in this franchise will ever recover. I don't even care what they do. If they even do anything with this with Suicide Squad 2 or any of the other movies he's set to be in. And he's not going to be better. I don't see him being any better anytime soon after this movie. And there's also the makeup designs and the costume on Joker that looks awful. Oh my god, it didn't even look like they were really trying that much. Like, having him have all those tattoos, that face paint is ridiculous, and just, it looks terrible, and was a terrible way of putting the Joker on screen. Yeah, I mean, it just looks lazy, and the makeup was awful on him. It's just ridiculous how terrible he looked on screen from one of the most iconic characters in comic books. Be lazily put on screen like this is ridiculous. And Harley Quinn's costume is just terrible. Like, what's wrong with the comic book costume? They should have just used that instead of whatever the hell they used for this movie. Because it's ridiculous how terrible this is for this movie. Because they basically just made it just for the fact of people, like horny teens and people to be attracted to Margot Robbie's body. That's about it, honestly. There's no reason for her costume to look like this, because it just looks painfully generic and nothing special. And the visual effects are just awful again, and it just looks so fake and ridiculous. Like, every single time you see Enchantress and Incubus on screen, it's just a bunch of ridiculously overuse of CGI, and it just looks fake and lazy, especially in a $175 million budget. It's ridiculous how bad CGI can look with a budget like that, and it's ridiculous. And there's way too much exposition, which also kind of ruins the pacing, along with the terrible editing. But it's ridiculous. It's how long the exposition goes on for. It did not need to be that long. It didn't need to go out and introduce the characters one by one and how they got into prison. And they didn't really need that. That just made the drag and go on for way too long, and so much longer than it should have. They did not need it to be this long. Exposition to be this long. All you really needed is to show who the characters are, and that's it. You didn't need all this useless backstory and how they got into the prison. You didn't need that into the exposition. All you gotta do is just show who the characters are. And the soundtrack is just terrible. I mean, it completely ruins classic songs like Bohemian Rhapsody and Heathens. And they're just used so terribly in this movie and just at the wrong moments. Like, Heathens was right before an action scene, which I don't feel like that fits an action scene. And then Bohemian Rhapsody was at a completely random moment in the film. Near the end of the film, it didn't even. And it just felt out of place with how the scenes were going, and it was ridiculous. And Enchantress is just a terrible villain. She's nothing special. She barely does anything except for dance and try to destroy the world, and then gets destroyed by the Suicide Squad in the climax. That's about it. She's nothing. She's just terrible and completely wasted. And they honestly probably shouldn't have made her the villain for this movie. It's either that, or they could done a lot more with her. Because seriously, they did barely anything with her which makes her not intimidating and just a weak villain. And the dialogue is so bad. Like some of the lines, like, "We're bad guys, it's just what we do." It just utterly makes me cringe every time I watch this movie. It's ridiculous that the writers couldn't have thought of a better line for that moment. And, I mean, the only thing that kind of saves that a little bit is Margot Robbie kind of delivered the line better than it should really have been. But it's still a terrible line. And many of the dialogue inside of Joker and Harley Quinn's romance as well is cringy, like the hunk thing. I think that was also pretty cringe, but just about most of the lines were cringy and that. And Joker and Harley Quinn's romance, nothing special. So it's barely even focused on. It didn't even need to be focused on at all in this movie, to be honest. Because it's just so out of place with the way the movie is that it didn't really need to show any bit, honestly. Like it just isn't a little bit in that exposition and just a random part in the middle of the movie, and that's about it. It didn't need to be in this movie at all. Just about the entire Suicide Squad was wasted, like Killer Croc, El Diablo, Katana, and Captain Boomerang. I found them to be completely wasted because Deadshot and Harley Quinn gets most of the focus, and then they're just there in the background. So I felt like they were a little bit wasted. And because of this terrible development, it makes the chemistry of the team very weak, and because they have little to no chemistry, they just go together and fight in a climax randomly without any chemistry with them. It's ridiculous. And the action scenes are just a bunch of overuses of CGI, and that's about it. Like every time, like I mentioned, every time Enchantress and Incubus are on screen, it's basically just a bunch of CGI, and especially in the climax, that was just a ridiculous amount of CGI that looked awful. And I mean, the overuse of CGI completely ruined that scene. So overall, Suicide Squad is a disaster, and just a really bad movie. Not a very good third movie for the DCU. And I'm gonna give Suicide Squad a 3 out of 10. That was my review of Suicide Squad. What are your thoughts on Suicide Squad? Did you like it? Did you absolutely hate it? Tell me in the comments below. And I'd like to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.